Ave amici! I'm Chef Benny and welcome back to Reheated History, the show where I can confidently say about the Romans, that's a spicy meatball. As a history teacher, I'm always looking for new and delicious ways to connect with the past. What did the common medieval peasant eat? What fueled the Roman gladiator? Did colonial Americans have a favorite comfort food? The answers aren't in textbooks, they're in the kitchens, farms, and fire pits of history. So, each week we'll cook our way through time, one humble, hopefully hilarious, and surprisingly tasty dish at a time. Because the best way to understand history is with our stomachs. This is Reheated History. Quick recap, if you're just joining us, we're celebrating Roman food in the month of August as a 4-part special because I got a little obsessed with a 2,000-year-old fast food counter. In 2020, archaeologists uncovered a fully intact Chipotle-style food counter called the Thermopolium in Pompeii, complete with frescoes acting as a picture menu and jars with food hinting as to what they ate. And I decided I wasn't going to be satisfied cooking just one dish off it. So here we are. It's week 2 of our August Roman fast food special, and today we're tackling some of the biggest and most absurd myths about ancient Rome. If you've ever watched a Hollywood movie set in antiquity, you've probably been fed a heaping, smelly pile of historical lies. A vomitorium had absolutely nothing to do with throwing up. It's an architectural term derived from the Latin verb vomere, which means to spew forth or to gush out. A vomitorium was simply a wide, vaulted exit passage built into giant public arenas like the Colosseum or the Circus Maximus. These massive brick and concrete corridors were designed by brilliant Roman structural engineers so that 50,000 screaming spectators could spew out of the stadium and onto the city streets in less than 10 minutes without causing deadly human stampede. If you've ever attended a football game, American or normal football, a university graduation, or a concert and left through a massive arched concrete tunnel, you actually went through a modern vomitorium. No buckets, no feather quills, and no purging required. So if nobody in ancient Rome ever called it that, where did we get the idea? Well, blame the 1920s, not the Caesars. The word really does trace back to the 5th century writer named Macrobius, who used it the way I just described, crowds spewing out of the stadium tunnels. But separately, real Romans really did write about purging at fancy dinners. Seneca's got a whole line about the elite eating so that they would vomit and vomiting so they would eat. Those two completely unrelated facts sat right next to each other for over 1,000 years without anyone connecting them until 19th century newspapers and a 1929 Aldous Huxley novel smashed them together and gave us the myth we all grew up on. So the vomitorium isn't some depraved ancient Roman invention. It's a 100-year-old typo that got really, really famous. And then there's the myth that everyone in Rome walked around wearing pristine white togas. In Hollywood films, every senator, street vendor, and beggar is draped in flowing white fabric. In reality, a toga was an 18-foot-long, heavy, semicircular wool blanket that required at least 2 enslaved servants to properly wrap, pin, and drape around your body. It had no pockets, it was hot, it was notoriously impossible to keep clean, and it completely restricted the movement of your left arm. Wearing a toga in public was the Roman equivalent of putting on a black tie 3-piece wool tuxedo in 100-degree August heat. Everyday working class citizens, shopkeepers, craftsmen, and line workers wore short, simple, undyed linen or wool tunics that went down to the knee, belted at the waist. Togas were strictly reserved for public trials, formal sacrifices, political speeches, and rich elites trying to flex their social status. And my personal favorite, the gladiator diet. Movies depict gladiators as these shredded, hypermuscular meat eaters pounding raw eggs and steak. But archaeological analysis of gladiator bones excavated from massive 2nd century cemeteries in Ephesus, that's in modern-day Turkey, proves they were actually nicknamed Hordearii, which translates directly to Barley-Men. A gladiator's diet was almost entirely vegetarian. I actually tried barley porridge called poles on my first episode. You should go back and watch it. They also had a diet that consisted of fava beans, lentils, and sour electrolyte-filled drink made from water and vinegar called pasca. So why were these lethal fighters eating a diet of cheap carbohydrates? Well, because they deliberately built up a thick, dense layer of subcutaneous fat over their abdomens and thighs. It's believed that a thick layer of fat meant that an opponent's sword or a trident cut would slash through subcutaneous fat with maximum blood loss for the audience without severing a vital organ or cutting a main artery. It made a dramatic, terrifying show for the arena crowd that didn't actually kill the fighter, allowing the school trainer to protect their financial investment. Because you might imagine that keeping, feeding, and training a gladiator, let alone many gladiators, could get expensive. And there are a lot of historians that believe that it was agreed upon that gladiators should put on a show whenever they can and don't actually kill their opponent if they don't have to. Which brings us to the food. While the gladiators were eating barley and vinegar water, what were everyday Romans grabbing on their lunch breaks at the Thermopolium? You might think fast food burgers were invented by American drive-thrus in the 1950s, but the ancient Romans were eating them nearly 2,000 years ago. Now, before we hop up to the counter and order ourselves an OG cheeseburger, let's talk about the guy the cookbook is named after. Marcus Gavius Apicius. He was a real, wildly wealthy Roman gourmet who lived under Tiberius, and by ancient reports, he blew through a fortune of 100 million sesterces chasing down luxury ingredients. Legend has it he once set sail towards Libya because he heard the prawns there were spectacular. He took one look at a sample brought out by his ship and he decided they weren't impressed enough, and he turned the whole boat around without ever setting foot on land. When his remaining fortune dropped to a measly 10 million sesterces, he decided he couldn't bear to live like a pauper anymore, so he poisoned himself. No, really. So somewhere behind this ground meat patty recipe is a guy who would rather die than eat cheap. I have a friend just like that. In the late 4th century Roman cookbook Apicius, we find a recipe for a dish called Isicia Omentata. It's a ground meat patty mixed with wine-soaked bread, crushed pine nuts, cracked black pepper, and fermented garum, shaped into patties and sold right off street counters. The original manuscript actually specifies wrapping the meat in omentum, which is a caul fat, the lacy membrane surrounding an animal's abdominal organs. And when it's fried over hot coals, the caul fat melted directly into the lean meat, basting it from the outside and keeping it ridiculously juicy on the dusty street counter. It is, quite possibly, the world's oldest recorded ancestor of the fast food burger. And street food like this was popular enough that the Roman emperors actually got nervous about it. Several of them, Tiberius, Claudius, Nero, Vespasian, they all passed laws restricting what taverns and thermopolia could sell. Claudius specifically banned the sale of boiled meat and hot water at these counters. The historian Dio Cassius says that it wasn't really about nutrition, it was about breaking up the informal social clubs called collegia that met over food. In other words, 2,000 years ago, an emperor looked at guys hanging around a hot food counter and they got nervous about what they were talking about. You know, like an old school no loitering sign. And here's the wild historical connection you all been waiting for. Some food historians trace the line connecting Isicia Omentata all the way to McDonald's. When the Roman legions marched across Europe to conquer Gaul, Britannia, or Germania in the 1st century, they brought their street food with them. They set up thermopolia in garrison towns like Londinium, which is London, and York, introducing to natives the fried, spiced mincemeat patties. Long after the Roman Empire collapsed, those mincemeat recipes survived in British, French, and German culinary tradition. Later, someone discovered that if you put it between bread, you could keep your fingers from getting greasy. So maybe, just maybe, this recipe eventually evolved into the Hamburg steak in the 18th century, which German immigrants then carried to America in the 19th century. And then the Americans made it amazing. So you aren't just eating Roman food today, you're eating the possible ancestor of a modern fast food. It's just unfortunate there's no American cheese or cheddar yet. To build an authentic 1st century Roman street burger, you're going to need 1 pound of meat. The cheaper the better. I did chuck eye. Fun fact, ground beef takes up anywhere between 40 to 50% of the cow, and that's why ground beef is so much cheaper than filet mignon. You're going to need half a cup of pine kernels, 1 tablespoon of garum. Yep, garum. It's salty fish sauce. Now, if you can't find garum, you can use fish-based sauce found in the supermarket, or you can just use regular salt. Ground pepper, handful of coriander, juniper berries, and if you can find it, caul fat. Now, I really tried to find caul fat. It's known as lace fat or omentum, I think it's how you say it. It's this fat netting that goes around organs. Now, you're supposed to wrap it around the patty. It holds together and adds this fatty flavor, but I checked 3 grocery stores and a butcher shop. No one had it. So if you can get a hold of some, it's an extra layer of authenticity that I'm enviously missing out on. Anyway, let's build this ancient Roman burger. Start by taking your bread, break it up and soak it thoroughly in a bowl of dry red wine and squeeze out the excess liquid. I made panis quadratus last week, so I'm obviously using that. In a large bowl, combine all of your not beef ingredients, bust out that mortar and pestle and grind up your juniper berries. Then mix up your coriander, your pepper, and your pine nuts and grind that up too. It should come out kind of like chunky peanut butter. Then take your cut of beef and slice it into tiny 1/4-inch cubes as best as you possibly can. Now, Romans didn't have meat grinders, so this is how cheap meat turned into ground beef. Obviously, clean it thoroughly after. I'm considering baking in the oven just to sanitize it. So now combine your ground meat and ingredients with that wine-soaked bread. The wine and bread act as a binder while adding a subtle flavor and keeping the interior of the patty incredibly tender. Next, you fold in your pine nuts, your cracked black pepper, crushed juniper berries, and that crucial 2 tablespoons of garum. The garum provides that exact same savory function that salt and Worcestershire sauce do in a modern burger. I actually had a friend from Washington State who used soy sauce on my summer burger once, and it blew my mind. It's pretty good, actually. Anyway, think of garum as the old school soy sauce or Worcester. It enhances flavor, and maybe I have Stockholm Syndrome because it's in every recipe I'm making this month. But either way, it's actually not that bad. If you've ever made burgers from home, this should feel familiar. You're going to take your ground beef mixture, you're going to shape them into 4 thick, uniform patties. I flattened mine so that they cooked all the way through, but if you keep them around, it's more like a meatball. It's fine. Heat your olive oil in a heavy skillet over medium-high heat. You drop the patties into the hot oil and sear them for 4 to 5 minutes per side until they develop a dark, fragrant, caramelized crust. All right, we're going to do a taste test of the world's first fast food burger. Let me go ahead. I'll get a little bit closer here. Here we go. So you can see the patties, they turned out actually fairly normal. The pine nuts kind of stand out. Now, this is not historically accurate, but I decided to put some on some bread, just like a regular hamburger. Mostly because I was curious. Anyway, here we go. Isicia Omentata. Yeah. That's really, yeah, it's a burger. It's really, really good. The texture's a little different because it wasn't run through a grinder. And the pine nuts are actually a really amazing addition. I'm actually thinking about just adding them from now on. Of course, check for allergies. Now, little note, my patties actually kind of came out kind of crumbly. I think that's because I didn't have the caul fat. So obviously, if you were able to find some, you'll probably be able to bind your burgers a little bit together and they won't be so dry. But this turned out really, really good. I'm really pleased with this. I think I'm gonna give this an 8 out of 10. It's pretty good. I mean, this is a burger. It's crazy. So I'm gonna try it with the bread just because I'm curious. That's good. That's good. That's good stuff. Yeah, throw a little ketchup on that. That's good. Yeah, all I need to do is find a Roman milkshake to wash that down. As always, my vote is only half the battle. The real judges are my family. If they approve of these ancient wine and garum burgers, we got a new favorite for the grill season. If not, I'll be eating Roman patties all by myself all week. Scores in the description. Forget the Hollywood cut for a second. No vomiting rooms, no pristine togas, no gladiators built like Marvel extras, because the real version is funnier anyway. Rome ran on regular guys grilling meat patties on street corners with a wine-soaked bread and a splash of fish sauce, and somehow that still slaps 2,000 years later. Honestly, I think that's a better story. Thanks for watching Reheated History. Stay curious, stay cool, and remember, if someone tells you a vomitorium was for throwing up, you tell them to stop regurgitating Hollywood history. I'll see you next Sunday.